A lot of parents all across the country are likely struggling with how to talk about last week's riots at the Capitol with their children. There are, though, some ways that you can approach the topic, even with young kids. Joining us now to talk more about this is board-certified psychiatrist Dr. Alauna Curry. It's very good to have you on here this afternoon. This is obviously something a lot of parents, myself included, are struggling with here. So what do you think are the best ways to explain to our kids what we all witnessed last week, and how much of that explanation and our approach depends on how old they are?
I think it very much, first of all, thank you for having me. I think it very much depends
Sure.
on how old they are and what their understanding is already. So you have to look at the individual child and remember that parents now, how we talk about and react to these things is also going to set an example for our kids and how they feel about it.
So one thing that I think a lot of parents probably are worried about is creating more fear and more anxiety in our children by
Mhm.
revealing too much about what we watched unfold, and what this potentially could have meant for our country and the well-being of all of us. How do you bring up the topic? How do you talk about it and explain it in a meaningful way without creating more fear and more anxiety in your child?
Sure. So I teach people that trauma is something that we all have experienced. So I think it's important for the first thing to normalize that we're experiencing psychological trauma. It's traumatizing to see your institutions and overrun by people who are angry and upset and the violence that we're experiencing all around us these days. So I think the first thing that parents can do is use the acronym DONE, be done with trauma thinking. And DONE stands for descriptive, objective, non judgmental, and effective. And what that means is that you help your kids to think of things in a more descriptive way so they can say, what are you feeling? And if they say that they're upset or they say that they're anxious or nervous, then you can validate that for them by using words like, I feel anxious too. This is scary. And it's okay to acknowledge that we're in scary times. But it's also really important to be objective and say, I believe that we are experiencing change and evolution of the way we do things, or I believe that we are in a space where we need to talk about what's happening. And your kids will feel better as they're thinking about things in a more objective way. The N is for non judgmental. I think it's really hard to
Yeah.
be non judgmental,
I
especially when you
agree.
see all the things going on. But we really need to understand where people are coming from so that we can understand how to help them. And lastly, we have to use effective words. Our words matter. What we think and what we say has a real impact on ourselves and on other people. And we really have to choose our words carefully with our kids so that they can understand what they're seeing, but you don't want them to find out from it from other people. It's important for the people they trust to tell them what's going on.
Yeah, and that, to that end, that's would be my concern, especially if you have an older child, someone who's in their teenage years. They're going to see and hear a lot of things, out there on the internet, on social media about what happened, and so you have to kind of provide some context for what they're hearing out there. So important.
Absolutely. Don't assume that if you're not talking about it, that they're not getting information about it because they are. And that as long as we're not having those conversations, someone is telling them something.
All right, great advice. Always really appreciate you taking the time. It's such an important conversation that a lot of families are having, obviously, all across this country right now. Board certified
Yes.
psychiatrist Dr. Alauna Curry, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.